and the other one is our top.
We're back, brother, and once again brought to you by PaintballToTheEnd.com.
Welcome to the 39th episode of the 10-Minute Marks. I'm Paul.
I am Jeff.
And today we are going to give our top 3 of the greatest Hall of Fame classes of all time. And there's not really very many in WWE right now. I think they started that, in 94 I think it was, or something like that.
93. And they did like 4 classes and they started up again in 04.
Yeah, but there were some reasonable selections.
My first pick for top 3 classes of all time would be 2006. This is the class that had Bret Hart, Eddie Guerrero, Verne Gagne, which I thought was a huge addition to the Hall of Fame. Mean Gene Okerlund, which I thought was another huge addition. Sensational Sherry. The Blackjacks, which I didn't agree with at the time, and I still really don't. And Tony Atlas. All of those being worthy of the Hall of Fame, I think, except for the Blackjacks. And the one criteria I had for these top 3 was I pretty much took the main eventers out. You take Bret, you take Austin, you take Hogan, you take Flair. That pretty much evens itself out. So I went with, okay, what were the other ones inducted besides just the big name? And to me, this is one of the most all-around classes you had, and it covered different eras, different organizations, just different time periods in wrestling. And to me, that's the best way to do this Hall of Fame. You pretty much got to have someone from every era and someone from every different organization. And that's one thing that there's people I disagree with being in the Hall of Fame for sure, quite a few. But at the same time, I've loved the way that Vince McMahon has tried to include all different eras and all different organizations. And this was one of the most well-rounded era and organization classes that I could see. I really like the addition of Verne Gagne. I really think even though, on the AWA DVD, people were like, well, he never wrestled in WWE. So what?
Who gives a crap?
Yeah, so what? He was such an awesome promoter and such an awesome trainer, and he discovered Hulk Hogan, that you can't leave him out. So that was my number 3 pick.
That was also my number 3 pick as well. And to add to the Verne Gagne thing, I think it was great because it's not just, WWE Hall of Fame necessarily. Right. It opened the door for AWA, which the following year they had Nick Bockwinkel, and who's also really deserving to be in there.
Yep.
So it kind of makes Vince look good in the sense that he's not picking just WWE. He's doing other organizations out there. Probably WCW as well. I mean, AWA. I mean, he's done. He also did Antonio Inoki. I don't remember if he was in WWE or not, but he was a very famous Japanese wrestler.
Yep.
So anyway, but I love the fact that Bret was there because he was my favorite when I was younger, and I was finally glad to see him in there. Going alive instead of Bret dying and Vince putting him in there posthumously, and that they were able to work their differences out. And of course, you had to do Eddie Guerrero because that year he died, and that was when they had the belt put on Ray, which I thought was long deserved. But like Jeff said, it was not littler, but the less main event people that was really good. I love the fact that Mean Gene got in there.
Yep.
I love the fact that Sherry Martel got in there.
She is probably to me the most well-rounded female, of our generation.
Right.
Of my generation. You can go back and say, oh, well, Mae Young was a tough girl and yada, yada, yada. None of us saw her wrestle. So to us, it's going to be Sensational Sherry.
It's our generation, get over it.
Yeah, exactly.
My second pick was 2009, which of course had Steve Austin. I was kind of like okay with Coco Beware being in there, but I was kind of like, why is he in there? It's kind of an iffy thing to me. But I was glad that Howard Finkel got in. One of the most recognizable voices in wrestling. I mean, doing the breath of him, you know, that really, you know,
and
baritone.
Champion!
Yeah, that high, you know, it's almost like a high baritone or something.
Right.
I was very glad Terry and Dory Funk got in there. I was like, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the best, you know, those two were one of the most influential wrestlers there ever were, and I'm so glad they got in there. The Von Erichs, of course, you had to get them in there, especially Kerry, because he was already a legend by the time the WWF was getting big, and I still think his best matches, some of his best matches involved Mr. Perfect. So he deserved it. And of course, you know, what can I say about Austin except he's Austin? One of my favorites, even though he was a little bit before my time, was Ricky Steamboat. And I was very happy to see him in there. So you had a very well-rounded class. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Bill Watts is in there too. And, you know, he was an influential promoter as well. So I thought it was a very well-rounded Hall of Fame class. And of course, to have Austin being the main event, I mean, come on.
My second pick was also 2009. For a lot of the reasons he listed. And it really pains me to say this because I was a huge fan of Koko B. Ware.
Right.
I've got his classic wrestling figure down in my room. And I also have his Hasbro figure somewhere around here. But I didn't see him getting in, really. I mean, I just didn't. And to know that his induction was really based on promotion of a video game really didn't help any. But the rest of the class you cannot deny. I mean, Koko's the only one that really you had doubts about, but the rest of the class, oh my God. You know, especially the Von Erichs. The Von Erichs were the first match that I ever saw was involving the Von Erichs. So, of course, they're going to be, you know, large in my heart. You know, even with all the personal tragedies and all the personal struggles I had, you've got to put them in the Hall of Fame. Funks, of course, you know, and the only thing I may have done differently with this class is inducted Randy Savage along with Ricky Steamboat. Just because, you know, what's the greatest match ever? Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage at WrestleMania 3. Are you kidding me? And Ricky Steamboat was also very influential on my love of wrestling. He was one of the first ones that I saw along with Koko. I saw Koko B. Ware do a drop kick and I was just like, oh, what was that? That was cool. And same with Steamboat. He did that deep arm drag. Whoa, that was cool.
Man, yeah.
So that was my second pick as well. My number one pick for the greatest class of all time, and this has nothing to do with The Rock's impromptu stand-up comedy act during the ceremony, was 2008, Ric Flair's class. Woo! Okay, sorry, I had to do it. Actually, I enjoyed JBL's induction of the Briscoes as much as I did The Rock. I mean, he had some funny shit.
Yeah.
But this class included Ric Flair, Rocky Johnson, the High Chief Peter Maivia, the Briscoe brothers, Gordon Solie, the greatest wrestling announcer ever, Eddie Graham, and Mae Young. None of these guys of which I had any doubts belonged in the Hall of Fame. You know, when I first heard about this class back in 2008, I was like, the Briscoe brothers? I've never even heard of them. You know, of course you heard of one Briscoe brother that palled around with Pat Patterson, you know, but finding out more about them, 24 tag team title reigns in over 2 decades. Are you kidding? That's like, and back then, when title reigns meant something, you had that many? I mean, granted, they were all in different territories, but that was just the era at the time. That was just the way things were. You know, it wasn't like it is now where there's only 2 players. You know, winning tag team titles in any territory was a big deal back then. It was huge. I mean, even back then, if you were the Georgia Championship Wrestling Tag Champ, you were probably a bigger deal than WWE Tag Champ now. So having 24 reigns like that over 2 decades, that was just huge. And that's really the reason I put this as number 1, is just because of the Briscoe brothers. I didn't know much about them until then. Plus you had Gordon Solie, who's the best wrestler announcer of all time. Eddie Graham, who was an awesome promoter. I mean, I remember Eddie Graham. Mae Young, Peter Maivia, Rocky Johnson. Come on. I mean, do you have any doubt they belong in the Hall of Fame, really? And of course, Ric Flair.
Yep.
So that's why I put 2008 as number 1 in my book.
I guess my top 3 is a little hard to say which is number 1, but these are the 3 that I picked. The 2004 induction, I felt, was very well-rounded as well. Probably for different reasons. First off, you had Big John Studd, you had superstar Billy Graham, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Don the Rock Morocco, Greg Valentine, Harley Race, Jesse the Body Ventura, the Junkyard Dog, Sergeant Slaughter, and Tito Santana. And that in itself, that's a pretty fairly good list too. Particularly, I think it's not one of those where, I guess you could say a few of them are main event status. Maybe like Sergeant Slaughter was. I would probably argue that Harley Race was as well.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them, I think, were pretty much, you know, mid-card or just semi-main event. But it was so well-rounded. I love the fact that Tito Santana got in there, even though he was probably just a tag team champion. I think he had the Intercontinental belt, and that was and that was about it. But he was a really good wrestler, and I still think Rick Martel needs to go in there.
Yeah, they should have had Rick Martel at the same time because their matches were epic.
Oh yeah, and of course going on old VHS tapes, I liked Strike Force. Mm-hmm. Their matches with Hart Foundation were really good. Mm-hmm. But overall, I just thought it was a really well-rounded, classic WWF kind of Hall of Fame, and I think it helps when there wasn't a whole lot of main event people in there too, because it opens the door for later ones as well. But yeah, of that list, Harley Race and Jesse the Body Ventura and Tito Santana, that was my 3 favorites. But having Bobby the Brainy Heenan in there as well, one of the greatest, possibly the greatest,
I think the greatest
manager of all time, manager of Andre and whatnot. Oh God, that guy can talk.
Still can.
So
they had his induction ceremony on WWE On Demand. And man, his induction speech was classic. Talking about, he slipped once and said WWF, and then the crowd was like, "Oh, you said WWF," and he was like, "Look, listen, when I was there, we had snakes, we had birds, we had dogs, It was like, golly. So basically, we were the Wildlife Federation, so I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, what a great cover.
That was great, that was classic. But yeah, Bobby Heenan being in that definitely puts that class over the top. We would love to hear your comments on this. Who do you think, what class do you think was the greatest of all time? Leave your comments down there. Check out our other videos over there. Email us, 10minutemarks@yahoo.com. We're on Twitter. Leave us comments on here. We'd love to debate this, and we'll read your comments on the show. We love debating stuff like this with people. So leave us comments, leave us emails. We'll read your stuff on the show and give you our give and take on it.
Absolutely.
And with that being said, I guess that we are done!
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the 10-Minute Marks. We've got some future episodes coming up, and they're really cool ideas, and we want to get your input as well. One of the episodes that we're going to do is our top 5 dream WrestleMania matches that never happened. The other one is easily a debatable topic on the internet and elsewhere, our top 5 wrestlers to never hold the WWE title, and there's plenty to choose from in that category. But that is 2 of the exciting episodes we have coming up for you. And leave questions, leave comments, leave your input on these episode ideas and for any future episode ideas that we've not come up with. So in the meantime, be safe, be healthy, and don't be done!